Hello everyone! Welcome back to my channel! Kung wala pa mo ka-subscribe, of course, subscribe na and of course, click the notification bell below for more knowledge. And now, we are done with Unit 1. We are also done with Unit 2. And for the last coverage for our midterm is we have this Unit 3. But before anything else, let me ask you, are you well versed when it comes to the learner centered approaches? Okay. How about, let me ask you this. Are your classrooms ready for learner centered approach? If hindi pa ready, we will discuss right now in Unit 3 about the organization and management of learner-centered classroom. It is really not enough that you know how to make use of learner-centered approach. You need to also consider other factors than the said approach. Part of it is of course how you organize your classroom, how you manage as and also how to provide a learner-centered classrooms or environment to your students. And now, without further ado, let's start discussing. So we have the forms of learner-centered organization, procedures, and physical structure. It is really a need for a teacher to know these things because in the future, you will be able to apply this one, particularly right now that we are living in the 21st century where you need to cope with the trend. And the trend is learner-centeredness inside your classroom. So first, we need to consider this one, number one, room structuring. So always remember the CFC. First, we have convenient arrangement of furniture. For example, in a certain classroom, did you observe that most of your teachers properly arrange their furnitures? Why? Kasi kung kalat-kalat yung furniture inside your classroom, there's a big tendency that what? The students might get distracted with those furniture. That is why to have smooth sailing discussion, you need to also fix or properly arrange the furnitures inside your classroom. What are these furnitures? You have the table, we also have the cabinets, the bookshelves, and the like. So, i-plaster yun nato nagtarong, no. Kay kabalo mo, you know what, in elementary, for example, the bookshelves, you place it beside the students. There's a big tendency that the students were what? Will get books, read, basa-basa taraw. Therefore, their attention is not in the class. So, you need to consider that one. Next, flexible seating arrangement. So, of course, we are more on traditional. Unsa man ang traditional nga kana? Atubang lang lahat yung mga estudyante natin sa teacher. But, in learner-centered classrooms, you need to have this what we call flexible setting arrangement. Therefore, their chairs, dili lang gid steady nga atubang lang sa imo tanan. Because part of learner-centered approach is we have collaborative learning. Therefore, they need to work in groups. Therefore, their seats should be flexible enough wherein maka-form sila og circle, dako ang circle, maka-form sila og kanang small group, and the like. Diba na yung mga bagong chair karon nga nice kayo siya nga kanang pa-triangle ang kanang ihang murag kuan arm. So masindot to siya kay mas maka-form sila og circle. Well anyways, next let's have clean, well-lighted, well-ventilated, noise-free, and fresh classrooms. Let's start with clean. Do you think maka-learn mo kung hugaw inyong classroom? I don't think so. Why? Because your students might get distracted with the trash inside your classroom. That is why you need to inculcate them the value of cleanliness. Next, well-lighted, well-ventilated. Did you observe that there are certain classrooms nga inyong naagihan na nga kanang close kayo siya then igang. Do you think makapamina mo sa iyong teacher? Dili, di ba? And of course, well lighted, there are students who are what? Who cannot really read kung dim light siya. Kailangan nila nindot hayag kayo ang suga. And of course, noise free. Di ba na yung mga kuan nga kanang duol kay sa banha, so we need to see to it nga ato ang classroom is layo sa banha. And of course, fresh classrooms. You know what? It could really what build the positive atmosphere inside your classroom kung fresh kayo. Pagsulod pa lang sa mga estudyante, better place to learn. Mao na ilang maingon. So again, number 1, room structuring that is most important. Most especially nga magtudlo mo og elementary nga kailangan design jud kayo inyo ang classroom nga kuan jud sa interest sa mga estudyante. And of course, high school dapat mubutang pod mo og kanang kuan. Pwede mabasa sa estudyante or dapat creative pod inyong classroom. So always remember that one. Next, number 2, we have classroom routines and procedures. Ano ba tong routines na ito? So routines are groundwork for orchestrated classroom. So routines, these are what? Balik-balik na ni. These are series of activities that you will do inside the classroom. Later on, we will discuss the advantage and disadvantage of routines. But let's proceed first. So we also have classroom routines and procedures about class rules and yeah. So of course, classroom routines, these are bounded with certain classroom. Inside your classroom, you need to what? Establish discipline. And part of establishing discipline is of course by simply stating the rules, policies inside your room. That is why as a teacher, before starting the semester before starting the academic or the school year, you need to see to it that you already make a list of the things that your students will do and your students should not do. The same with our class, diba? I already stipulated you on the very first day, orientation, I already stipulated our rules and regulations inside this class. And of course, part of classroom routine. So, sir, ano ba yung example ng routine? Example of routine is first, in elementary. After flag ceremony, before the students could enter the classroom, they need to form a line first. Karang palinyahon sa mga estudyante. Usually, ginabuhat na mo ni siya sa grade 3. So, palinyahon sa mga estudyante. Pagkatapos na maglinya, of course, they will enter isa-isa. Pagsulod nila isa-isa, o sulod ingkod din ng mga estudyante, then after that activity ay kanang buhat nila, of course you will have this what we call kanang nakasanayan naman nila routine is to sing an action song. So magkanta sila action song, may tatlong bibi ako nakita, mataba mapayat ganon. Then after that one, they will need to pick up some pieces of papers, then pagpunit ingkod dayon. Then after incode is vocabulary dayon, spelling, yun. We call that one as what? Routine. And now we have this transition. What is transition? It is a change from one state or condition to another. Transition go. The same with this one. Diba na transition effects before come out to the next slide? Also, as a teacher, we need to have this transition. Why? To avoid dull moment. As a teacher, you need to have the skill when it comes to having this transition. Why? Because for example, your discussion is all about science. You discuss about cell. Nagisgot na kag cell. Then magunaw na ka unsaon nimo para sa next topic na pud ninyo. Unsaon mo pag-move for next topic? So you discuss about cell. Therefore, the next topic would be what? The parts of the cell or the cell organelles. So therefore, you will need to think of certain words or activities wherein it will jive to your next activity or next topic. So students coming in the hall to begin formal instruction in class, whole class instruction, and the like. So that is the nature of transition to avoid dull moment. That is why, ka-observe mo sa mga teacher, di ba? Nakanamayin sila, okay, and now, next. Di ba, di nila i-next diretso kay murag na atoy ka na, murag dull moment, murag na pause ni dito ah. So therefore, as a teacher, you need to be vocal. You need to have this what we call smoothness when it comes to the flow of your lesson. So we have the solving pre-lesson transition, solving transition during the lesson, solving post-lesson transition. So of course, for you to be able to have, for the next activity, so of course, you need to have this, what we call, maingon mo nga, okay, I think you're all done, and now, let's proceed. Are you ready? Yes, we are ready. Ganon. That is one examples of the transition that you could be able to use. And of course, part of routine is the use of materials. Make your rules and procedures on the distribution and collection of materials, storage of common materials, teachers' desks and storage areas, and students' desks. So of course, part of routine is the submission of the papers. In elementary, you need to teach your students how to submit their papers. Kay in elementary, di ba salimuang na sila magpasa. Sir, magpasa na ko. Di ba? So therefore, you need to teach your students have this routine on how to submit their output. So, di ba, mayon si teacher, okay, submit your papers on the center aisle. Okay, pass it forward. So, yun. So, therefore, there is what? A smooth way of submitting their papers and it should be practiced. Dapat i-practice gina nila hantod sa kaya na nila na buhaton independently without telling them. And of course, group work. Sometimes we do have problems when it comes to letting our students work in groups. So the rules and procedures on group work addressing the following: first, movement in and out of the group, expected behaviors of students in the groups, respect behaviors of students not in the group, expected rather, and of course, group communication with the teacher. So of course, we need to teach our students the routine if they will opt to have this what we call group work. So paano yun? So of course, here, I have an example here. So, we need to make an acronym. So, groups. So, G stands for give thoughtful feedback, R respect others, on task all the time, use soft voices, participate actively, and stay with your group. So, with the use of the acronym group, your students could be able to know what are the things that they will need to do if they are working with groups. Okay? So, ganun yun. And of course, teacher-led activities. So rules and procedures in this area pertain to student attention during presentation, student participation, talking among students, obtaining help, out of seat behavior when work has been completed. So of course, in teacher-led activities, part of your routine, you could really teach the students to make use of what? Signal interference or hand gestures. Like for example, we have here, I have a question, so they will just itaas lang nila yung king nila. Next, of course, if they want to answer, ganun lang yung itataas nila. If they want to comment, just see. And of course, restroom, ganito. So therefore, with the use of this one, we could be able to have a smooth sailing class. Why? Because there will be less distraction. And now we have this how to establish classroom routines, because it is not just enough that you have routine. As a teacher, you need to also know how to implement it. So we have number 1, explain the routine to your class. First, you need to instill to your students what is the importance of having this routine. Makatabang ba ni or makadaot ni? And of course, you need to also allow your students to ask questions about the routines. Yes, at first, is maglisod yun o kanang apply mga estudyante. But I think along the way, if they are used to that routine, they could be able to do it without telling them. Next, number 2, model your expectations. Sometimes as a teacher, we need to we tend to think that students already know what we are trying to say. So that is why, as a teacher, part of learner-centered classrooms, we need to model first. Tudluan kita sa mo buhat. For example, kani, routine of submitting the papers. So of course, kita sa ang mo guide sa estudyante kung saan nila pag-submit. So kita sa ang mag-demonstrate on how to do things, particularly in the submission of papers. And after that one, number 3, have the students practice the the routine. Then sila then mag-apply ana. Always expect that first, there are what mga mali gyud sa imong estudyante when it comes to submission. That is why we need to have a long rope of patience. Okay? So of course, if they are used to it, diba, we have this, what we call this one, law of exercise by Edward Lee Thorndike, connectionism theory, or SR theory. Diba, state niya dito, ang practice makes perfect. So therefore, as what I've said, if they are used to it, therefore, there's a big tendency nga ma-instill na nila na silang kaugalingon. Next, number 4, implement the routine in your day-to-day activities. Because kung lat ang imuang implementation na, makalimot talaga ng estudyante. So that is why, para ma-practice sila, everyday yun di mo na i-apply. For example, in elementary, na-observe yun ako, ginakuan man to silang teacher nga kanang mag-line gid sila before sila makasulod. So, if they are used to it, therefore, maanad na ilang system. Next, number 5, review your routine as necessary. There are no perfect routine if you implemented it pinakauna or first. You need to also assess if the students are following your routines, kung naabay lapses ibang routines, kung naabay problema nga kailangan i-fix. Because it is what dynamic pod, it changes over time. Pero dila pod major changes. Dapat anam-anam ra pod nga changes. So, para mas mapa-improve pa nimo sa imuhang mga estudyante ang application of your routine. So, those are the things that you need to instill into your mind on how to establish classroom routines. Next, the social environment. So, of course, room structuring, routines, and of course, social environment. According to the learner-centered psychological principles, number 11, social influences on learning. Why? Because the environment that we are living with, it really influences our attitude, particularly towards learning. Ika nga, we have the saying, birds of the same feather flock together. So, we have this quotation by Hoshton and Di Pietro, 2007. Let me read it to you. Students experience the classroom as not just as an intellectual space wherein we are using our cognitive, but also as a social, emotional, and physical environment. Classroom that subtly or indirectly excluded certain groups of students tend to be common from the students' perspectives. Students have the particularly negative reaction to instructors who fail to acknowledge consequential local or national events. So from this context, we are now in the 21st century. One of the features of the K-12 curriculum is inclusive education. So therefore, no one should be left behind. As a teacher, we need to consider the differences when it comes to the aspects of social, emotional, physical, or even intellectual of our students, because in that way, they could be able to have, or we could be able to have, a harmonious relationship with them, which really builds a positive atmosphere inside our classroom. So we have here aspects of classroom climate. So ito yon. So in intellectual, of course, we need to instill into our mind that students do really have their own way of learning. That is why as a teacher, we need to consider that one. And of course, if we consider that one, the students would really feel, oh, si teacher, consider niya ako ang kuan. So therefore, there is positive perspective of the students towards your class. Next, social. You need to also let your students work with their classmates. And you need to provide what? Feedback to your students. With this, they could be able to know what are the things nga tama nila gibuhat and what are the things nga dili tama ilang gibuhat. And of course, emotional. You should really value the emotional aspect of your students. That is why in learner-centered classrooms, you need to see to it, for example, there are students who are what? Diba? We discussed in the learner-centered psychological principles that if the students are emotionally unstable, therefore they are not motivated. That is why we tend to go with the emotion of the students for us to be able to know how to reach them out, how to motivate them. And of course, physical. So students can interact with this and of course see each other. Of course, part of having this positive atmosphere in the classroom is of course having a contact with your students physically. In elementary, ano yung ginagawa namin? Ang ginagawa ko, hindi namin, ginagawa ko. Ang ginagawa ko sa elementary, particularly when I was assigned in grade 3, is part of our physical contact, don't take it negatively, is of course once the student has a problem is I will let him or her to hug me, because in that way they could be able to feel nga I am with them. Therefore I do have a connection with them. I stand as their second parent wherein they could really trust me. So, yun. So, those are the aspects of classroom climate. I know in the future you will become teachers. Again, you need to consider the intellectual, social, emotional, and physical aspect. And of course, part of the social environment is we have this, the classroom climate is influenced by two things. So, physical environment, yun yung sinabi ko, the arrangement of chairs, furnitures, the design of your classrooms, and we also have psychological climate. So, ito yon sinabi ko sa physical environment and psychological climate. So, mahalaga rin ito. So it is not just important that you have a very creative, well ventilated, well lighted, well structured classroom. It is also important to note the safety, relationships, and teaching and learning aspect inside your classroom, because as what I've said earlier, it builds what? Positive atmosphere inside your class. It will either make you or break you. That is why we tend to ask ourselves, how can educator ensure that his or her classroom has a positive climate? Number 1, specific classroom rules and procedures are clear. That is why during the first day, it should be well stated. You need to also ask some clarification from your students kung nasa sila'y pangutana on your certain rule. Because in that way, establishing during the first day will really help you to build a rapport or to build a what we call this one, authority or power inside your classroom. Although we discussed that in learner-centered, both teacher and the student should have a power. But when it comes to the classroom rules and regulation, the teacher should be what? Assertive. And also, students are involved in rule making. So, it is not just you, but you need to also ask the students what are the rules that they need to, they want to have in the classroom. Or do we need to revise this one, this certain rule? So therefore, it should be what? Student and teacher working together or having a consensus to have the rule for the whole school year. Next, to reinforce acceptable behavior and provide negative consequences employed. So of course, inside the classroom, how could we be able to reinforce acceptable behavior? For example, there are students who were what? Honest. Ano siya? Teacher, kanang nagkuan gud si ingon ana. So therefore, you need to also what? reinforce him or her by praise. I-praise mo bata, hello, very good kayo, honest, good kayo pa. Oh. How about those students who are doing something or who are misbehaving in our class? You need to also state them what are the possible consequences that they will face. O dili pud kailangan ni corporal punishment. We will just make use of what? Negative reinforcement. For example, okay, kay nagkating man ka sa ko ang klase, yun ano itong buhaton. Kanang, kailangan mahuman nimo ning chapter 1 to chapter 5 og answer. Kay kung dili nimo na mahuman na ato bangon jud nimo ko. Oh, that is form of negative reinforcement. So, dili nimo siya i-punish, but instead, nalang kay kwaon sa iyaha nga kuan. So, another example of negative reinforcement is kanang. For example, ikaw, work ay kanang ang mga estudyante karon are doing their modules. So, inside their house, their teachers are their parents. So, negative reinforcement, ingon ni siya. Ay, anak, what ka nag-answer ha? Ambis na imong cellphone. Di nimo ni makuha imong cellphone kung di nimo na mahuman og answer. So that is part of negative reinforcement. And also napati ito. Establish clear limit and for an acceptable behavior. That is part of your rule. That is why I stated here in our class nga I am a cool teacher. I do have a high level of tolerance when it comes to mga kabuang. But you need to see to it that di lang pud palabi. Because we do really have our own limitations. Ganun. Next, healthy balance between dominance and cooperation. So, teacher has the power, student also has the power. But of course, there should be what? Walay mag-dominate nga power sa duha. They need to work as a team. So, the teacher is aware on the different needs of the students. The teacher has with-itness. Ano ba itong with-itness? According to Jacob Conin, with-itness is we are aware, we have the eyes at our back. So we are aware what is happening inside our classroom. As a teacher, dapat aware kita kung sa may tabas sa itong classroom. Bisan pag naaman ta diri or wala, dapat kabalo ta kung sa mga gipang buhat sa itong estudyante. For example, si teacher, nag-join siya og seminar. Wala na siya, pag abot niya, uy nga nung lisang naman ako mga estudyante. So therefore, you need to have the eyes inside your classroom. Enhance students' responsibility for their behavior. According to the realities and choice theories by William Blashier, we need to teach the students to have their own choice. And they need to be responsible with their choices. Dapat ituro natin yun sa mga bata. So, encourages active learning. So, of course, that is learner-centered approach. We need to let the students be active participants of the teaching and learning process. Promotes and facilitates the individual's discovery of personal meaning of idea that is under what? The principles of learning. That the learning is an experience which occurs inside the learner and is activated by the learner, and learning is a consequence of experience because they could be able to find or have this personal meaning of the certain concept by, of course, relating it to their previous experiences. So it emphasizes the uniquely personal and subjective nature of learning. So we need to, of course, diversify our assessments, our activities that meet the students' needs. Respect for diversity and recognizes people's right to make mistakes. In learner-centered classroom, instill into your mind that it's okay to have mistakes. But as long as you know how to make it right, the next time around that you will encounter it, you could be able to know how to do it the right way. And of course, tolerates ambiguity. When we say ambiguity, there is what? Lack of clearness or kalibog. So therefore, we need to know how to address the kalibog. No! In Bisaya niya, we need to know how to address the yung mga hindi maintindihan ng ating mga estudyante. Next, evaluation is a cooperative process which emphasizes on self-evaluation. That is why we are having it right now. more of our activity are more on self-evaluation siya to be able for you to know what are the things that you were not able to know and what are the things that you already know. Encourages yan spelling. Openness of self rather than concealment of self. So in learner-centered classroom, students should know or we need to let the students to express themselves, express who truly they are. And of course, encourages learners to trust in themselves because sometimes the students don't have this confidence because they don't have they don't have trust to their capacity. As a teacher, we need to believe in our students that they could do these things. Because there are some teachers who would really say, di man ay nimo kaya, ayaw na buhata. That is no. As a teacher, we need to encourage the students, kaya nimo ni, you could do this. I believe in you. I trust on you. So therefore, the students could be able to reflect, my teacher trusts me. Therefore, I need to trust myself. Yun. So make people feel respected, accepted, permits confrontation. So of course, you need to confront your students if he or she is misbehaving. And of course, develop the cognitive and affective faculties of the learners. That is why we have the affective, cognitive, and psychomotor domain to instill, to have a holistic development of our students. So those are the things that we need to remember when it comes to having this positive classroom climate. So I really do hope that you will familiarize all those things because it is very much important, particularly if you will teach soon. Kung ma-assign na mo. And now, let's have this learner-centered classroom rules and roles rather. So I know that you already know your role as a learner in a learner-centered classroom, and also you already know what are the role of the teacher. So let's just have this one. Of course, the role of the teacher first. You are the facilitator that guides your students. You are not the dispenser of knowledge. You are not the fountain of knowledge. Why? Because you need to also acknowledge that your students are the what? One of the richest resources for the learning him or herself. That is why as a teacher, our role is to what? Help the students, guide them in the process of the learning or the teaching and learning process. Of course, we need to allow them to explore their knowledge. So again, we need to facilitate them. Provide anytime, anywhere, and on-demand support. Sometimes the students, as what I've said earlier, feel that, ay, uy, di na ko ni kaya because wala nagsuporta sa kuha. As a teacher, we need to let our students feel that we are with them. We are supporting them. We are guiding them. Next, embody core values that support deeper learning. So, of course, we need to instill our students the values. Of course, with that, they could be able to have a deeper learning, particularly on the things that we let them to explore. So I think one of the values that you need to teach to your students is what? Patience. Because sometimes there are things that hindi natin maintindihan. But along the way, if we have a long row of patience, then we tend to focus on certain things. Therefore, we could really understand the underlying nature of a certain concept. Next, number 4, truly encourage students their own learning. So of course, they are the center of the teaching and learning process. So therefore, they could be able to what? Explore their own learning. And of course, as a teacher, how could we facilitate that one? By simply motivating them. By giving them activities that will really motivate them. Maka dili sila ma-bored. And of course, number 5, real-world and authentic learning experiences. Sometimes as a teacher, magtulot ta, kanina lang, ana. But in elementary and high school, we need to incorporate things that are familiar to them, that are what relevant to their experiences. That is why ka-observe mo sa elementary, ganan kayo na sila mga subject nga luto-luto. Kaya ka-experience naman sila luto-luto. Di ba? Yun. How about the role of the learner? So first, they are expected to construct knowledge meaning out from what they are taught by connecting them to their prior knowledge. That is constructivism. So as a learner, you could be able to gain from your experiences and relate the new learning of yours to your prior knowledge. Number two, they do have an active role because they are the center of the teaching and learning process. They talk more, therefore the teacher will talk less. And of course, they can work collaboratively because you know what, we need to instill them that two heads are better than one. But it is not applicable most of the time. But when it comes to having these diverse ideas, they really need to work in groups because they are interdependent learners. They can explore or discover their own learning. So therefore, as what I've said, that they are the center of the teaching and learning process, they could be able to explore what are the things that they need to learn. That is the role of the learner. And now, what are the things that we need to remember when it comes to the role of discipline in the learner-centered classroom? First, collaborative class norms. So as what I've said earlier, that your classroom should have a norm, or in other layman's term, what are the things that they really need to follow. So kasama na rito ang rules as well as regulations. Number two, logical consequences. So therefore, part of your rule, therefore, the students could be able to know what are the consequences of their actions. For example, they tend to vandalize your class or your chairs, ingon-ingonan, or doing drawing sila. So or if your students are misbehaving in your class, ano yung consequence na kakaharapin nila? So we have examples here. You break it, you fix it. For example, one of the students or what? Nag-vandal siya, drawing siya sa lamisa. So therefore, you're the one who draw that one, vandalize our chairs, which is not your property. Therefore, you will be the one who will fix it. So therefore, kiskisan nimo, barnisan, yun. Next, loss of privilege. For example, in your class, naay bata kani abot late, then you are starting your quiz. So therefore, they will not have the privilege to take your quiz. Time out or take a break. So of course, there are students who are what? Kanang mga isog kaayo. Okay, isog man kayo siya. Therefore, you need to talk to your students. Okay, hugong sa amo ay sa mag-away, adto sa canteen, pagpalit sa dito, ingon na, para mabugnaw siya. That jives with fine tunings. Therefore, other term for fine tunings is we have this antiseptic bouncing. Kung saan man na siyang antiseptic bouncing. Diba sa classroom kayo, na yung mga banhaan ng mga estudyante. Tungkol kay banhaan man siya ng estudyante, kung saan man nato siya. So, therefore, suguon na itong estudyante, okay lang ga. Pasugo ako ha, palit ragod og ko ang chalk dito ah. So, that is your way para tanggalon siya sa klase because nakadisturb na siya sa iyang mga classmate. That is antiseptic bouncing or fine-tunings. Para ma-realize po niya, well, kapalit siya dito, no, itama ka to kung bana-bana dito. Sige, pangawar ako ni teacher dito, kay bana kay ko. Therefore, ibalik niya, ma-realize niya nga, mali day siya. Next, consistent application. For example, apply ka ng consequences sa mga estudyante or discipline sa mga estudyante, disciplinary measure. Then, karon ni-apply ka, then pag-ugma, ay, dili lang, sunod na lang, Therefore, your students might think, favor man ni si ma'am, dili niya kuanan, walay consequence ingon na kay anak og kuan. Tapos kami nga kuan, ani niya. So therefore, consistent application kanunay gyud dapat nimo. You need to have the stand when it comes to your disciplinary measures. Next, student specific. Also, before applying consequences, you need to ask your students. For example, katong na late, you need to ask him or her one-on-one talk ha. Nganong late man ka? Nganong nadugay man ka? Ano ka quiz? Ay ma'am, ingon ani manggod na ma'am kanang kuan ba, wala ko kasakay og tricycle, ma'am, nagbaktas ra ko. So therefore, you need to consider the reason, or if it is valid reason, of your student, because they are diverse in nature, right? So therefore, you need to be specific when it comes to application of your disciplinary measures. Next, time for resolution. So this is best applicable kung naay mga away-away sa mga estudyante. So how to have this resolution? You need to talk to them one-on-one. So na may nag-away doon, sinumbagay sila, so istoryan mo isa-isa, you need to give them the benefit of the doubt. So as the each other side, then of course meet halfway kung unsa man imuhang kailangan buhaton para mapag-ayos sila or ma-solve ang ilang problema. Next, calm spaces. In your classroom, you need to have this, what we call this one, calm space. Or in your school, kung sa man yung calm space, wherein your students ma-release niya ihang kalagot. For example, there are certain students who are very impulsive, nga manumbag rag kalit. I don't know ano na yung mga ingunan ng estudyante, maybe more on emotional factor or aspect na siya. So therefore, para mubugnaw siya, you need to place them a certain place wherein mukalma sila. So that is calm spaces. And now, we have the ways of dealing discipline problems. So importante gid kay ini, you need to take note of this one. First, use verbal reinforces that encourages good behavior and discourages bad tendencies. For example, in elementary na agi mga bata nga magbinuang. So sa positive ta, na yung mga bata nga kanang mga achiever kanang kuan, hala teacher natagak imong kuan. Hala teacher kanang kuan, yun ani na nga si pangilabot si kuan. Hala teacher kana nagawa si kuan good. So therefore you need to reinforce them yung ka. Hala salamat gud lang ka ha, kabuutan nimo uy. And of course, kung nakabuhat po sila dili maayo, ay po sila pakaulawi sa classroom. Ano na po mo, huy, ayun na yung ana, uy, kay bad na siya. So therefore, they could be able to know what are the things that you will say kung nakabuhat sila maayo o nakabuhat sila og dili maayo. And of course, aside ato is kanang, for example, ang bata kay kanang nanganumbag siyang classmate in elementary, kung ano gid may magsulti. Langga, ayo, ana, ay mong kuan, bad man na. Na ikaw daw sumbagon, sakit ba yo? So therefore, makauna na sila, ay di na ako ni buhaton, sakit man dahi sumbagon. Ganon. Next, use non-verbal gestures, frown or hard look to dissuade them from mischiefs. Nagi mga binuang nga mga estudyante nga samukan kayo sa klase. That is what, make use of what? Signal interference sa mga estudyante. Sa na, lagatan ni mong mata. Or kung dili kaya, duulan ni mo, pero di mo hapak ko na, duulan lang ni mo para mahilom siya. Or kung di kaya mo anak ka, okay, warning, murag banha na gyud. O pwede kaya magsulat ka sa board of, okay, warning. And of course, dialogues could help in discovering problems and agreeing on mutuality beneficial solution. Particularly kanang katong giingon ako ganina nga, there are students who, what? Nag-away sila. Therefore, you need to ask each sides nga nabuhat nila to. Therefore, there should be one heart-to-heart talk sa imong mga estudyante. Award merits for good behavior and demerits for inconsistencies and lapses. So for example, sa inyong klase, uy, naghilom sila, kaya naghiloman mo, hatagan ta mo candy. Ay, banha man mo, sige, sunod na lang ta mo hatagan og candy. Ay, pwede nga. Daw hatagan kay, banha mo. Di pwede mo na dapat in a good way yun yung mga pagkasulti sa mga estudyante. Next. Focus attention on one who is unruly and is about to disturb the neighbors. Lead him or her to secluded area and nicely convince him or her to be quiet. So, therefore, dalhin mo siya sa calm spaces. So, therefore, sometimes, manggod, we tend to give our warning as a group sa itong mga estudyante. But if siya ragyod ang banha sa klase, therefore, you need to remove him out from the class. As what I've said earlier, you could really make use of what? Antiseptic bouncing. Like for example, suguonin mo siya. Okay lang ka, pagpalit ito ag chalk, para mapahawa tong mga banhaan. Yan na, ako ito, teknika yung rataan eh. Next, a private one-on-one brief conference to your students, particularly katong nag-misbehave, pangutanon mo siya, ano nabuhat niya to? Nga magbanha-banha man siya. So dapat di mo siya pakaulawan sa classroom nga yun ano. Okay, class, banha jud kayo ka. Samukan jud kayo ka. Pakaulaw ra kayo ka. Ayaw yun na yun, ana, ha? Dapat one-on-one talk yun sa estudyante nga ka na. Langka, ano na buhat manimo to? Ay, mao. Sunod ha, ayaw na to ha, buhata. Next, allow the students the freedom to express agitated feelings and misgivings rather than censure them right way. So sometimes nagot itong mga estudyante, they misbehave because there is something that they really want to express. So part of your one-on-one kanang talk is i-let mo estudyante, sige, i-release. Pasin, lain nilang pamina or lain nilang buot. So therefore, ipa-release na mo sa ila. Okay, at the end or after that one, is they could be able to realize nga mali day ilang mga gipangbuhat. Next, mao po ni ang mga unacceptable and ineffective ayaw gyud ninyo ni buhata sa iyong klase. Scolding and harsh words as reprimand will have a negative effect on the entire class. Mao ra kasi mga klase, hoy, mga wa mo'y mga buot. Unsa man iyong mga gipangbuhat ha? Wa jud ko kanay pakaulaw ra gyud mo. Kamutanan. Ay gyud na buhata ha. Labi na mo yung ka, hoy ikaw kurdap iya. Gaigat-igat ra na imong agi. Ayaw gyud maulawan ang mga estudyante. That is a very no-no in a learner-centered classrooms. Next, nagging and fault-finding together with long sermons and repugnant and nasty. So karon nagbinuang na pud mo. Gipadako dahil mo sa inyong ginikanan nga ing ani. Blah 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 blah. Taas na kagyaw-yaw sa ilaha. Nagsermon na ka. So therefore, mga estudyante, matrauma sa imo. Di sila ka na maminaw sa imo because of that negative sermon of yours. Siguro pwede ka makasulti na, pero in a really nice way. Like for example, class, we are inculcated with values sa itong ginikanan, di ba? So dapat, i-apply ta na diri sa itong eskwelahan. Hindi dapat na magbinuang. O dapat kalma lang gid ka sa imong pag-share sa ila. Dapat tigid pinasok ko. Next, denying students some privileges due to unnecessary hyperactivity could all... Okay, so of course, we could deny some privilege. Di lang yun palabi. Like for example, oy, late ka. Di na ka pwede mo sulod. Gwas. O, di na ka. Wala ka i-quiz karon whole day ha. So, dili na siya pwede. Next, use of ridicule or sarcasm could humiliate and embarrass for a mentor. So, for example, kani siya na yung mga estudyante nga nangutanan, at yung mga estudyante nga mangutanan nagtaro, like for example, Sir, unsa gani ang kanang kuan? Tubago tayo sa teacher. Langga, niminaw ka? Bungol ka? Pangatulig ba ko? Oh, dili gud mag-imna na, di gud ma-sarcastic, pero depende sa mga estudyante kung close na mo. Pero, of course, pwede po, as a teacher, pwede man na sabihin, joke, atang lang bitaw, unsa gani yung concern? O, ana. Pero ano po nang grabe kayo, kapilosopo nga sarcastic na gid kaayo ha? Nami ka, niminaw ka wala? Ayaw gina ha? And of course, keeping a student in a detention area, ayaw yun. Ang calm spaces, it aims to what? Para ma-relieve lang ang tension sa klase. Dili ni mo ikulong ang estudyante dira. Di ni mo yes, detain. And of course, assignment of additional homework. Mo na din, na mga maestrang yun na ninong tungkol kay mga banha mo, assignment, dugang assignment, dagan mo assignment, bawal na siya ha. Ayaw gyud i-punish imo ang mga estudyante. Grades for academic achievement should not be affected due to misdemeanor. Di gyud dapat na mapikturan sa imuhang, for example, na bata nga bugoy siya pero achiever siya, ayaw gyud minus sa iyang grado pod tungod kay bugoy siya. Maybe dito ana na sa aspect about values, pero when it comes to the numerical grade nga wala man dito sa criterion ang pagkabuotan, so ayaw pod minus siyang estudyante. Okay. So of course, thank you so much for watching this video. We are done with Unit 3. If you have questions, you may ask me in our group chats. And of course, I really do hope that this video will really help you to have a very well-versed, learner-centered classrooms in the future. If you have questions, again, ask me in our GC. This is your Poking Instructor, Mark Jan M. Martinez. Bye-bye. Don't forget to like and subscribe.